The echo of the impact returned from 4,000 yards, silencing the entire Green Beret team. The woman they'd called the armorer lowered the rifle, her hand shaking not from fear, but from the ghost of a past she'd buried. Fort Sheridan Proving Grounds existed in a state of controlled pandemonium, a sprawling city of concrete and steel dedicated to the science of warfare. But inside the cavernous weapons maintenance depot, a different universe reigned. Here, silence was the commander. The air, thick with the sacred incense of gun oil and carbon solvent, was a balm to Alara Vance. For 3 years, she had been the resident ghost, a civilian contractor who materialized at 0500 and vanished at 1800. Her presence as constant and unnoticed as the hum of the industrial dehumidifiers. At 30, Alara moved with an economy of motion that bordered on spectral. Her hands, gloved in black nitrile, danced over the disassembled bodies of rifles and pistols, each part cleaned, gauged, and reassembled with a watchmaker's precision. To the soldiers who cycled through, she was simply the armorer, a piece of the building's infrastructure, no more remarkable than the steel workbenches or the rows of locked cages. Her anonymity was a fortress, built brick by careful brick over 1,000 days of quiet, unremarkable competence. This Tuesday began under the same cloak of routine until the dust of an arriving convoy hazed the morning sun. An operational detachment Alpha, a Green Beret team, rolled in, their armored vehicles growling to a halt outside. They entered the depot not with a bang, but with the focused, predatory energy of men who lived on the razor's edge. Their leader, Staff Sergeant Kane, was a man carved from granite and confidence. He didn't walk. He occupied space, his presence demanding the world bend to his trajectory. Alara didn't look up from the M4 carbine she was servicing, her focus locked on aligning the gas tube with microscopic perfection. The team's boots echoed on the polished concrete, a disruptive symphony in her sanctuary. Their banter, laced with the dark humor of their trade, filled the void. Need a full workup on this beast, Kane's voice cut through the air. A heavy-duty Pelican case landed on her counter with a definitive thud. He snapped the latches, revealing the contents with a flourish. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, lay a Cadex Defense CDX 50 Tremor. It was less a rifle and more an artillery piece for a single soldier, a .50 caliber Titan designed to deliver judgment from across zip codes. Its surface was scarred with the honest wear of deployment, but it was immaculately kept. Alara finally looked up, her gaze sweeping over the weapon, then to Kane. She pulled the case closer, her gloved fingers hovering over the rifle for a moment. She could feel Kane's eyes on her, expecting awe, perhaps a flicker of intimidation. She gave him neither. Instead, she began her work. Her hands moved with an unnerving familiarity, separating the upper from the lower receiver, sliding the massive bolt carrier group free. The movements were too fluid, too efficient for someone who just followed a manual. "You handle that like you've been doing it your whole life?" Kane observed, leaning against the counter. His tone was a blend of casual curiosity and sharp-edged suspicion. "It's my job," Alara replied, her voice flat. She picked up a borescope, its fiber-optic tail snaking down the barrel. The monitor flickered to life, showing the lands and grooves in crystalline detail. She was looking for microscopic heat-stress fractures, something most armorers wouldn't even know to check for without a specific complaint. "Most civilians get a little wide-eyed around a 50 cal, Kane pressed on. "The tremor isn't exactly something you learn about in a pamphlet." Alara's hands paused for a nanosecond. "I'm a quick study." It wasn't a lie. She had devoured every technical manual in the depot's library. But the first time she'd learned the ballistics of a .50 BMG round, it wasn't from a book. It was in a windswept mountain pass, with the fate of her team riding on the lesson. She finished the inspection, her fingers tracing the rifle's contours with an intimacy that felt less like maintenance and more like a reunion. She knew its secrets. The precise torque for the scope rings that maximized harmonic balance. The way different ammunition lots affected its cold-bore shot. This knowledge was a phantom limb. A part of her she was forced to pretend didn't exist. Kane watched her, a slow, calculating smile forming on his lips. He saw the way she'd instinctively checked the crown of the barrel for nicks, a habit of seasoned snipers, not depot armorers. The way she moved wasn't just competent, it was ingrained, cellular. It was interesting. And Kane's world revolved around investigating things he found interesting. Tell you what, Kane said, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial register. You clearly know your way around the hardware. Ever actually sent a round downrange with one? No. Alara lied, the words smooth and practiced. She began reassembling the rifle, each click of metal on metal a precise, measured beat. I just keep them running. A damn shame, Kane drawled, exchanging a look with his team, who had subtly gathered to watch the interaction. A rifle like that is an artist's tool. Deserves to be in the hands of someone who appreciates the art. A younger team member, a specialist named Diaz, piped up, his eyes bright with hero worship. Sarge here can hit a playing card at a mile with that thing. Saw him do it in training. Another, older operator scoffed. A mile is just stretching its legs. The real test is out past 3,000 yards. That's where the math gets weird. Spin drift, the Magnus effect, it's a whole other religion. Alara's hands stilled for a heartbeat. The words echoed in her mind, not as abstract concepts, but as variables in a familiar, deadly equation. She saw the numbers scrolling behind her eyes, the complex formulas for calculating a bullet's flight path over extreme distances, influenced by everything from the Earth's rotation to the humidity in the air. They were ghosts of a former life, specters of calculations made under unimaginable pressure. What's the furthest anyone's pushed one of these? Diaz asked. The record books are full of liars and legends, Kane answered, his gaze locked on Alara's hands. But tomorrow, we're heading out to Range 37. Got special authorization for an extreme range certification. We're pushing out to 4,000 yards. Gonna see if the tremor lives up to its name. 4,000 yards. The number struck Alara not as a distance, but as a memory. It tasted of dust and adrenaline, of the biting cold of high altitude and the metallic tang of fear. It was a number tied to a single, defining moment that had shattered her world. Her left hand, the one hidden from his view, began to tremble faintly. A tremor not of nerves, but of damaged nerve endings, a permanent souvenir from a war she wasn't supposed to remember. As she gave the rifle a final wipe down, something small and metallic slipped from her breast pocket, clattering softly on the workbench. It was a custom-made data chip, no bigger than a thumbnail, its casing made of a dull, non-reflective titanium. Before she could snatch it, Kane's finger pinned it to the mat. That's a peculiar-looking piece of tech for an armorer, he said, his voice soft but laced with steel. Alara met his eyes for the first time, her own gaze a placid, unreadable mask. It was my father's, she lied. He was a meteorologist, liked studying atmospheric data. She scooped up the chip and pushed it deep in her pocket, the worn metal a cold weight against her thigh. The truth was infinitely more complex. The chip held the ballistic data for a dozen custom-built rifles, calibrated for every environment from Arctic tundra to desert sand. It belonged to a ghost. Your father teach you about ballistics? Kane pressed, sensing the crack in her facade. Among other things, Alara replied, turning her attention back to the rifle case. You know, Kane said slowly, the idea taking shape in his mind. Since you're so interested in data, you should come out to the range tomorrow. See how real-world variables chew up theoretical numbers. I'm sure Major Reed would approve the request. Alara's blood ran cold. Major Reed. The name was a key turning a lock in the deepest dungeon of her memory. A face in a mission briefing years ago. A sharp, intelligent woman from G2 Intelligence who had questioned the intel for a mission in the Hindu Kush. A mission that had gone catastrophically wrong. A mission from which only one person had returned. 0700 sharp, Kane continued, snapping the rifle case shut with an air of finality. Range 37. Don't be late. As the Green Berets filed out, a sudden, ringing silence descended on the depot. Alara stood motionless, her carefully constructed fortress of anonymity now breached. This wasn't a random invitation, it was a summons. Tomorrow, at a range designed for impossible shots, she was scheduled for a reunion with her own ghost. The rest of the day was a waking dream, the routine of cleaning and cataloging weapons, a fragile shield against the storm brewing in her mind. As the clock ticked towards 1800, Alara found herself staring at her reflection in the polished steel of a gun safe. The face looking back was a stranger's mask, but behind the eyes, a flicker of the woman she used to be stirred. The woman they called Echo. A name earned because her shots were often only confirmed by the sound of their impact, arriving from impossible distances like a whisper from the gods. That woman had died in the snow and rock of the Hindu Kush, buried under an avalanche of classified reports and official lies. The mission had been compromised from the start. Bad intel, courtesy of a turned asset, had led her team into a perfectly orchestrated ambush. From her overwatch position 2 kilometers away, she had watched the trap spring. While providing suppressive fire, she saw her teammate, callsign Falcon, get hit by an RPG. He was exposed, bleeding out. The protocol was clear: maintain overwatch, protect the rest of the team. But protocol hadn't accounted for the sight of her friend dying in the snow. She'd made a choice. Abandoning her fortified sniper's nest, she'd raced down the mountainside, her medical kit in hand. As she was applying a tourniquet to Falcon's leg, a second RPG had impacted just meters away. The world had dissolved into a white-hot flash of pain. Shrapnel had shredded her left side, severing the radial nerve in her arm. Falcon had died in her arms as she fought to stop the bleeding, his life fading as the feeling in her own hand disappeared. She was the sole survivor, a ghost left behind by a phantom team. After her shift, she drove not home, but to a quiet care facility on the outskirts of town. In a sunlit room overlooking a garden, her father sat in a wheelchair, his eyes vacant. Former Master Sergeant Daniel Vance, a legendary Army marksman from the Vietnam era, was now a prisoner of Alzheimer's. The disease had stolen his memories, leaving behind a hollow shell. "Hey, Dad," she said softly, taking his hand. It was cold, limp. "I have to do something tomorrow. Something I swore I'd never do again." She spoke into the silence, not expecting a response, but needing to give voice to the conflict raging within her. "They're asking me to take a shot. A long shot. And I don't know if I can, or if I should." As she spoke, his fingers began to move, tapping faintly against the armrest of his chair. It was a slow, rhythmic pattern. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. The breathing technique he had taught her as a teenager. A secret pass from one marksman to another, designed to slow the heart and steady the hand for a perfect shot. It was a piece of him that memory loss couldn't erase. A ghost of skill surviving in the ruins of his mind. A tear traced a path down Alara's cheek. He was gone, yet here was his echo. In that moment, her decision crystallized. She wasn't going to that range for Kane, or for the army, or even for the ghost of Major Reed. She was going for her father. She was going to answer the echo of the man who had taught her how to shoot, to prove that the skills he had passed down were not buried with her past. She would take the shot to remember who she was, even if she could never be that person again. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in bed, the tremor in her left hand a constant, rhythmic reminder of her failure and her survival. But for the first time in years, she didn't fight it. She watched it, studied it, timed its cadence. The tremor wasn't random. It was a pattern, a rhythm. And in that rhythm, the ghost of Echo saw not a weakness, but an opportunity. Dawn at range 37 was a spectacle of raw, untamed beauty. A thick fog blanketed the valley, muffling the world in a shroud of gray. Alara arrived to find a lone figure waiting by the main tower, her silhouette sharp against the mist. "Alara Vance," the figure said, her voice exactly as Alara remembered it, calm, intelligent, and cutting. "Or do you still prefer Echo?" Major Evelyn Reed turned, her eyes holding the same sharp intelligence Alara recalled from that fateful briefing room. The years had been kind, but a certain weariness now shadowed her features. "I was the one who flagged the bad intel on that mission," Reed said, wasting no time on pleasantries. They buried my report right alongside your team. Before Alara could process this, the rumble of Kane's vehicles filled the air. The Green Berets disembarked, their swagger undiminished by the early hour. They set up their equipment with practiced ease, their world-class spotting scopes and wind meters looking like alien technology against the rugged landscape. Kane strode over, a confident grin plastered on his face. "Ladies," he greeted them. "Perfect day to make the impossible possible. Hope you're ready to see how the pros do it, Vance." Alara just shrugged, playing her part. "Here to learn." "Sure you are," Kane muttered, turning to his team. "All right, Diaz, you're up. Let's see you kiss that target at 4,000. The young specialist settled behind the massive CDX-50 trimmer. Through the spotting scopes, the target, a 36-inch steel plate, was a tiny shimmering speck dancing in the atmospheric distortion. The challenge was immense. At that distance, a bullet would be in the air for over 7 seconds, subject to every whim of wind and gravity. Diaz's first shot was a clean miss, the spotter calling it 3 mils left low. He adjusted, fired again. Another miss, this time high. He fired 5 shots, his frustration mounting with each silent failure. The rifle, a masterpiece of engineering, was being humbled by the sheer physics of the problem. One by one, Kane's other operators tried their luck. They were elite soldiers, some of the best marksmen in the world. They came closer, kicking up dust around the target, but none could land a solid hit. The 4,000-yard mark was proving to be less a firing line and more a graveyard of confidence. Finally, Kane turned to Alara, his expression a mixture of frustration and challenge. "Your turn, armor. Let's see what all that data taught you." A hush fell over the range as Alara walked to the firing mat. Every eye was on her. She settled behind the tremor, the cold steel of the stock feeling less like a tool and more like an extension of her own body. For a moment, she let the facade crack, her hands moving with instinctual grace, adjusting the scope's parallax, checking the level, seating the bipod legs firmly in the dirt. Then, catching Kane's intense stare, she deliberately fumbled with the bolt, pretending to struggle for a moment. "Need a hand?" Diaz offered, his tone kind. "I've got it," she said, smoothly chambering around. She pulled the rifle into the pocket of her shoulder, the fit-perfect familiar. Looking through the high-powered scope, the world vanished, replaced by a magnified circle of shimmering air. "Remember your fundamentals," Kane advised, his tone thick with condescension. "Breathe from the diaphragm. Squeeze, don't pull." Alara ignored him. She closed her eyes. The world of sight was a liar at this range. The truth was in the unseen. She felt the wind on her cheek, a steady 8-knot crosswind from the west. But she also sensed the subtle thermal updrafts rising from the valley floor, an invisible current that would lift the bullet halfway to its destination. Her mind became a ballistic computer. Elevation, 42.5 mils up. Windage, 3.2 mils left. At a half-mil holdover for the thermal lift. She opened her eyes, and then she embraced the tremor. Her left hand, supporting the rifle, shook in its predictable rhythm. 3 seconds of stability, 1 second of movement. She began her father's breathing cycle. Inhale 4, hold 7, in that pocket of stillness. As her lungs emptied and her body achieved a state of perfect equilibrium, she waited for the tremor's window of calm. The moment arrived. Her world narrowed to the crosshairs and the trigger. Her finger moved, a slow, steady press. The trigger broke like glass at 3.5 pounds. The tremor bucked against her shoulder, a violent but controlled explosion. Time seemed to warp. She watched the bullets trace through the scope, a faint ripple in the air, an invisible thread connecting her to the target. 7 seconds felt like an eternity. Ping. The sound was faint, almost lost in the wind, but it was unmistakable. A clean, metallic ring echoing back across 2.3 miles of empty space. Dead center. The range was utterly silent. Kane slowly lowered his binoculars, his face a mask of disbelief. Reed had a small, triumphant smile on her lips. "Lucky shot," Kane finally managed to say, his voice raspy. "Pure dumb luck." "You're right," Elara said quietly, her voice devoid of emotion. "A civilian probably couldn't make that shot." She worked the bolt with fluid, practiced grace, the heavy action moving as if it were weightless. She chambered another round. No fumbling this time. No pretense. This was Echo. She found her rhythm again. Breathe. Wait for the window. Squeeze. The rifle roared. 7 seconds later, ping. The second impact struck the first, the sound a fraction sharper. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. She fired a third time. Ping. The impacts were so close they were beginning to deform the steel plate. She had created a group the size of a fist from over 2 miles away. She made the rifle safe, pushed herself up from the mat, and finally met Kane's stunned, uncomprehending gaze. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm the woman who keeps your weapons from failing when you need them most," Elara replied, her voice steady. Major Reed stepped forward, holding a ruggedized tablet. "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to former CIA Special Activities Division Operator, Elara Vance. Call sign Echo." She swiped the screen, and a classified personnel file appeared, credited with over 50 confirmed engagements, including the longest operational sniper shot in agency history. A shot taken under combat conditions in the Hindu Kush Mountains. A wave of shock and dawning recognition passed through the Green Beret team. The CIA's paramilitary operators were the stuff of legend, ghosts who moved through the world's deadliest places, their successes and failures buried in black ink. "I heard about Echo," Diaz said quietly. "They said she was the sole survivor of that ambush, that her whole unit was wiped out." "The unit was lost," Elara confirmed, the words tasting like ash. "Falcon, Nomad, Atlas Al-Kia, I was the only one who made it back. The official report said you abandoned your Overwatch position." Reed interjected, her voice sharp with a memory of years of frustrated investigation. "It said you broke cover to save yourself while your team was being overrun." Elara let out a short, bitter laugh. "That's the story they wrote. The agency was always good at creative writing." She looked at the men before her, at the judgment forming in their eyes. "I held my position for 2 hours while my team was pinned down. When Falcon was hit, I displaced to render medical aid. I chose to try and save my teammate's life rather than watch him die from 2 kilometers away." Her left hand began to tremble more violently now, the stress aggravating the old injury. "While I was working on him, my position was overrun. RPG shrapnel took out my arm. Falcon died in my arms. By the time I could move again, the battle was lost. But the primary asset," Kane asked, his professional curiosity overriding everything else. "Secured," Elara stated. "I evaded enemy patrols for 3 days, carrying him on my back with a useless arm, and delivered him to the secondary extraction point. By then, the agency had already filed their report. Operator failure. Position abandoned. A convenient lie to cover up a massive intelligence failure." Reed swiped the tablet again. A grainy video began to play, satellite thermal imagery. It showed a lone heat signature moving with incredible speed and precision, engaging multiple targets while repeatedly dragging a wounded teammate behind cover. "This footage was declassified 6 months ago," Reed explained. "It corroborates Elara's account completely. The mission was compromised before you even landed. The agency buried it, and you with it, to protect a high-level source who had been turned." Elara watched the silent, ghostly figures on the screen with a strange sense of detachment. It was like watching a film about someone else's life. "So, they cleared your name?" Kane asked. "Posthumously," Reed answered grimly. "As far as the official record is concerned, Echo died on that mountain. It was easier than admitting they destroyed one of their best operators to cover their tracks." "I didn't want the record cleared," Elara said, her voice barely audible. "Dead women don't have to lie about who they are. Dead women can find peace." She stood up, brushing the dirt from her pants. "The agency wants you back," Reed said. "Full reinstatement. Back pay. Your choice of assignment. They want to make it right." Elara's laugh was sharp this time. "They don't want to make it right. They want their weapon back." A weapon that can make policy decisions from 3 miles away. But I'm not that person anymore. She held up her trembling hand. This weapon is broken. I've learned to work with the tremor, to turn a disability into a rhythm. That's not the kind of predictable perfection the agency requires. You just put 3 rounds in a group none of us could dream of, Kane countered. Broken or not, you're still the best there is. At a steel plate, Ilera shot back. Put a man in that scope. See if my hand stays steady then. See if I can live with the sound of that impact carried back on the wind. I've heard enough death on the wind to last a lifetime. Reed stepped closer. What about Falcon's family? Nomads? They still think their sons died because their teammate ran. Don't you owe them the truth? The question was a physical blow. Ilera thought of the families she had never been allowed to contact, the funerals she could never attend. Give them the video, she said finally. Tell them the truth. But leave me buried. She turned to leave, then paused and looked directly at Kane. Your biggest problem isn't your technique, she said, her voice cutting. It's that you believe a superior weapon can compensate for flawed intelligence. My team is dead because of that exact mindset. The words hit him harder than any bullet. 6 months passed. Ilera Vance still worked at the Fort Sheridan Armory, a ghost in plain sight. But her secret was out, traveling in the quiet whispers that bind military communities together. Her story became a quiet legend. She didn't return to the CIA. Instead, a new, unofficial mission found her. Veterans with their own scars. Hands that shook from nerve damage. Minds that raced with the ghosts of combat. Began seeking her out. In the quiet hours before the depot officially opened, she would meet them at the range. She didn't teach them how to be killers. She taught them how to manage their broken pieces, how to turn tremors into rhythm, how to find stillness in the storm of their own bodies. She taught them how to shoot again, not for combat, but for peace. One morning, Staff Sergeant Kane appeared at the armory door. He wasn't alone. With him was a young sniper, barely out of his teens, whose career was about to be ended by a combat injury that had left him with an uncontrollable hand tremor. He needs to learn what you know, Kane said simply. There was no swagger left, only a deep, weary respect. Not just the math, the weight of it. Ilera looked at the young soldier, seeing a reflection of her own past in his anxious eyes. She nodded slowly, picking up a cleaning rod. The hardest part isn't making the shot, she told him, her voice soft but firm. It's living with the consequences. Every bullet you fire tells a story. If you're not prepared to carry all of those stories for the rest of your life, find another job. The young sniper looked down at his trembling hand. They said you made the longest shot in agency history. How do you live with a record like that? Ilera offered a sad, knowing smile. By understanding that the only measurement that truly matters isn't the distance in yards, but the lives you save. I've made perfect shots that led to mission failure, and I've had near misses that saved my entire team. The record books don't capture that. She placed a hand on the rifle sitting on her workbench. Your job isn't to be a legend. It's to be precise, effective, and humane. Make every shot count, not for the history books, but for the people who are counting on you to bring them home. As Kane and the young soldier listened, Ilera went back to her work, her hands moving with practiced, steady grace, the perpetual tremor now just a part of a rhythm. The ghost of Echo was finally at peace, not in anonymity, but in purpose. Some warriors are destined for the history books. Others are destined to make sure those books tell the truth. Ilera Vance had finally chosen her story. Ilera's journey teaches us that our deepest wounds can often forge our greatest strengths. What does true strength mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please comment with respect for the experiences of all service members. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories of quiet heroes.